Hi everybody, we're going to be finishing up chapter 3. We're going to be going over standardized recipes and costing them. So we're going to explain why it's important to use standardized recipes. We're going to talk about the steps involved in making a standardized recipe. Then we're going to talk about the 3 different kinds of standardized recipes. Describe why and how managers create recipe cost cards. I'm going to outline the process for calculating a plate cost. Then also how you're going to cost for buffets and salad bars. So first, standardized recipes. It is one of the biggest tools that we have in order to keep our cost under control. A standardized recipe is a written format used to consistently prepare and serve any given menu item. It concludes a complete list of ingredients, their quantities, and the procedures to be followed each time the recipe is produced. Now, since the recipe is so important, it must be clearly written and in every little detail, so each different cook that you have will be able to replicate the dish every time. So we'll talk about the steps in developing a standardized recipe. So you can see there are 8 different steps. First one is to observe the menu item being prepared. So what you're looking for is how the employee produces each menu item. What and how much of each ingredient is going to be used. When and how the ingredients are weighed and measured. What small and large equipment is needed and when. How is the item portioned after it's all been made? And if there are different cooks using them, using the recipes, are they using any different techniques? So the next step is considering the prep details. So this step, some tasks can be combined. Trying to figure out what the book was trying to say on this. So this step can increase productivity. So the main thing I think they're trying to get at here is make sure you get everything at the same time. If you're going back and getting utensils, you don't go back and get one at a time. You're going to go back and grab your measuring cups, your measuring spoons, your mixing spoons, mixing bowls. You're going to get that all at the same time. Throw it all in the bowl, head back to the table. You're going to go to the walk-in and grab everything you need at one time. Dry storage, grab everything you need at one time. So step 3, you're going to write a draft of the recipe. So from the 2 steps we've already done. This is a first attempt to all ingredients, utensils, pots, pans, and a list of how you're supposed to make the recipe. At this point, you also should be costing out how much it is. And we'll talk about that at the end of this video, and there's also another video that does this in detail. Step 4 is reviewing and revising that draft. So the draft should be reviewed by the person that prepared the item. Now, if you're doing all of it, then, still step back, maybe give yourself a little bit of time. Not too much time, but you don't want it too fresh, but you want it fresh enough. I don't know quite how I want to say this, but if you're doing it yourself, just maybe even have somebody else be around with you, because there's always error. Especially if you make a recipe a lot of times and you think you use this, or you're just using a dish or a dash of this and that, you're not. Always have somebody else there if you're doing it by yourself. But if you're not, the person that's making them, have them look over at it. And if there's any revisions, go ahead and do that now. So next thing is, we need to make that recipe. We've written it all down, and now let's see how it all turns out. This is considered the recipe testing stage. Now we get to eat it, see what it tastes like. We want to make sure that the quality standards are there. Now consider more revisions. Now that we've tasted it, are the standards met? Are we happy with it? So yeah, if it's not meeting the yield of either quality or even quantity, you might want to remake this. And think about your cooking times or your measurements. If revisions need to be made, the recipe should be tested again before moving on. So after that, you're all ready to go. You implement it and you're off. Yep. So some advantages of using standardized recipes. So it simplifies costing of the menu items because you know exactly what it's going to be. You're not changing the amounts. Your vendor might change the prices, but ultimately you're still using the same amount, so you're going to have a better idea of what your cost is. It also encourages consistency in the plate presentation. It promotes consistent food production quality as well. Promotes consistent yield. So we're going to dip into yields in just a minute here. It increases productivity of the kitchen staff because you know what you're doing. But when you do the same thing every time, you get faster at it. It improves job satisfaction. You know you did your job well. It simplifies the training of the staff, especially if you've ever worked anywhere where one chef does it one way, another chef does it another way. That can definitely be a little harder to train. And it saves money by controlling your inventory levels. It also saves money by controlling overproduction. You're not making too much. So let's talk about product specification. Sorry, give me one moment. I want to make sure I'm in line with the book, see if there's anything I'm forgetting. So these describe the quality requirements of a product that are purchased. And it helps ensure the staff and managers and vendors that all understand the quality needs. So specifications. They should be short and simple while still providing an accurate product description. They must be capable of being met by several vendors by encouraged bidding. Now, sometimes that's not going to happen if you have a very specific item. They might only be carried by one vendor. You won't have that kind of bidding power. And they should be able to be verified to ensure that that there's proper quality received. And they should be written to permit reasonable compliances with quality requirements. Man, those last few were hard to read. So here's some more on how to describe that. So that was a lot of words, but maybe not quite understandable. So specific brand or trade name. Certification with industry specification. Careful description of the required product. Now the book even says use of samples. I'm not sure how that fits in because what they're talking about here is you're wanting to get you want to use a new product for whatever reason. And you call your vendor up and say, hey, I'd like to try that. I wouldn't use that to describe the product. That's just whether you should, change the brand of it. So like if you're thinking about brands, so let's think like brand of cheese. So maybe you on your recipe, you only want like Boarhead's cheese. That's a good mid-grade cheese. Certification with industry specification. So maybe you're looking at more of a USDA choice ribeye steak, 6 to 8 ounces. Or maybe you're just looking for grade A extra large eggs. That's what they're trying to say here. So there's 3 different ways, or 3 different recipe forms, I should say. There's the standard recipe, there's the narrative, and the block form. So the standardized one, I think most people have seen. I'm sorry that's kind of cut off on the bottom there, but you still have the same picture in your book. It includes all the ingredients on top with the numbered procedural steps below. And also up here, I want you guys to pay attention to this. how much it yields, how much it makes. So it's going to be a total of 28 ounces, which is going to be 7-ounce portion size, which gives you 4 portions. Here's all the equipment needed, prep time, cooking time, and then here's all the steps below. So one thing about this, it requires you to shift your attention between here where all the stuff is and then down here. So it says place herbs. So then you got to come back up here. Oh, which herbs are they talking about? And then back down here to do what it says. Now the next one is the narrative form. I find this more of a home cook kind of thing, and I don't even use this at home. This is the most difficult one to read. It's a difficult one to get your mise en place or your prep done for, because it's all just written here. So then you have to pick through and find what items you need, get that all out, and then come back and find it all and the sizes and then do it. This one's a little bit almost scattered, even though it's a nice, neat, paragraph. It's still harder to break down. The most popular one is the block recipe form. So it has everything all listed on one side and the procedures on the other side. And you notice once again it has your yields up top and all your stuff needed for it. Like I said, this is preferred by most chefs because it is the easiest one to read. I mean, depending on the size of your kitchen, I've worked at some real small kitchens where there's not a lot of prep work done. So it might be easier to do all this, get it going, and then you can prep the next item while this first one's cooking or whatever's going on. So between the first two, the standard and the block form, are more of the recipes that you're going to see in a restaurant. So costing, ooh, I didn't get these all set up, sorry. So costing the standardized recipes. Managers create recipe cards to understand the cost for each menu item. I should say cost. Sorry. Recipe cards right here. They create the recipe card by listing the ingredients, and then these are not adding up. Alright, we'll just kind of ignore this picture. So creating a recipe cost card by listing each ingredient and its associated cost for any given recipe. Then dividing it into the total number of portions to determine the per portion cost. Managers need to understand AP and EP and be able to translate between the two when arriving at recipe cost. We're going to go over this in a minute. So here we are. So now that we know what our standardized recipe is, now it's going to be easier to cost it. So here's step 1. You're just going to copy over all the items that are needed. Step 2 is the amount and the units of them. 3 goes off your invoice cost, so how much it cost and at what you're buying it at. Now there's a lot of math involved here from getting it to the recipe cost per unit. And then step 5, you'll be able to calculate all of it and then add it up, divide by portions into your total cost. So there is going to be another video linked, but I just kind of want to go over this real fast. So if we take the pint, we have 1 pint of olive oil. It's $112 for 4 gallons. So you need to break that 4 gallons down to 1 pint. The same thing here with onions. So you want a half a pound of onions, but they're coming in this 50-pound bag. So you got to do the math from there. And this one's actually a little bit different here. So this does come in nice. You know, the garlic clove, 5 cents each. You need to do 3. So that's the only one that really, well, I guess the other one's gross. This one really gross. It's easy to do that one. Now these down here, the to taste. We're going to do this later. I believe it's chapter 7. We're going to be learning the spice factor for these last 3. So let's take a step back and talk about portioning. The book sometimes kind of works backwards. So you're going to be portioning these out either by weight, the mass of an item. It's usually expressed in pounds or ounces. You see I put the abbreviations as well. I know not everyone here is all restaurants. So you're going to see either pounds or ounces are the usual portions. You will find metric. That's more commonly found in baking. Or you have your volume. Now it's I'm trying to think of the mathematical term, the space inside of an object. So this is more commonly wet, but not always. So you got your teaspoons and your tablespoons. Like I said, it's either wet or dry. Then you have your ounces. The book calls them liquid ounces. I've honestly never heard liquid ounces before. I mean, I'm looking at my bottle of water right now, and yep, 20 fluid ounces. And you also have like your cups, pints, gallons. Those are either wet or dry measurements. And lastly, you have count, which is each, a certain amount of items. So like you're using 3 eggs for this omelet. Maybe not the best example, but a lot of these items are often purchased as weight. So if you think of the fact of onions, you might have a whole onion in a recipe, but you're buying the onion as a 50-pound bag. I think the book talks about potatoes and fruits that way. So we'll talk about that more later on in chapter 7, but I just touch on it now. Oh, I'm sorry, did not get those pretty. So determining the standard portion cost. Like as we talked about before, there's the AP, as purchased cost. So this is the cost of an item without any kind of shrinkage. There's no trimming or cooking weight loss. And then you have your edible portion, which is referred to also as a usable portion. It's the cost that item is with all the trimming and weight loss. Now converting the two, you do that with yields. I guess, you know, there's different kinds of yields. So a yield, we talked about yield earlier in the recipe, how many portions that yields. So this is how much the meat's going to yield or the vegetables are going to yield after it's trimmed or cooked. So there are examples already out there for you guys of yield tests. The book talks about butcher yields and cooking yields. So, I mean, that's a good place to get started. But once you're in the restaurant, you should have your chefs or yourself whoever's doing the primary of the cooking, do those tests themselves to see how accurate that is. So here's an example of a brisket. They did it with 5 different briskets. So the first one, it weighed 9.4 pounds. After they cooked it, 6.3 pounds. So they almost lost 3 pounds itself in cooking. And then by trimming off the fat, they only have 5.1 pound left. So only 54% of that original brisket was usable. And look down here, this was a big one. They lost 4 pounds in cooking, then almost another 2 pounds during trimming. So these are really fatty briskets here. I mean, the fat gives you flavor, it keeps it moist. So, I mean, it's a good thing, but, I mean, it's averaging that you're only yielding 50% of what you're actually buying. So, calculating plate cost. Plate cost is the total cost included of a single meal served to a guest. A menu item worksheet calculates each item's ideal food cost based on the ingredient, portions, and then the current cost. Managers can use individual plate costs to come up with a forecasted overall cost of sales. So the next slide will show us kind of more of what that's talking about. So this actually kind of goes with the picture I have on there. So the cost of making a hamburger basket. So it's a 5-ounce beef patty, which is costing you 13 cents. Recipe cost is 0.65. So I'm trying to figure out, that was probably per ounce. You times that by 5? No. Oh, it's still by ounce. It's got to be. That doesn't add up. Forgive me, I'm not sure what that one's about. So then your hamburger bun, whatever size package, break it into one, 17 cents. Tomato slices, 14 cents each. And gets down here, so this is, you're adding in your fries, the cooking oil, the ketchup. how your salad's broken down. And once again, your beef brisket, the sauce, the baked potato with it. And down here you can't see, I'm sorry, but it's the same one that's in your book. It even throws in half of this dinner salad as the recipe. So now we're going to skip into a kind of different world here of buffets and salad bar costs. So these can really be a big challenge for managers because people can eat whatever they want. It's not standardized. You still have a standardized recipe, but it's not a standardized plate cost. So the most common method for determining this style is a price per person method. To calculate the price per person method, the total cost of food served during that time period divided by the number of customers served during that period. They do give a good example of that in the book. It's talking about, you know, going over one and counting your beginning inventory. Where do they have that? Excuse me. Here we go. So they say assume the cost to stock the buffet for service and have a necessary backup is $800. So that's your opening inventory. At the end, you only have $200. You have 225 customers, so you take that 600 divided by the 225, and it's giving you an average of $2.67 per person. Now, you need to be, one thing the book doesn't talk about, because they just talk about that at one buffet. So it depends on what your buffet looks like. A lot of them have hot and cold tables. I think that's kind of going more towards a salad bar. So if you have more than one buffet line or buffet table, you need to do that for each table. Add those together, and then you'll get your accurate cost per customer. I think that's it. Oh, yeah, I totally messed those up today. Sorry. So, yeah, just have the key terms. The next video is going to go over exactly how to cost a recipe. I think that's it for this week. Thank you guys. Have a good one.